Montana Territory, 1873. The winter had descended upon Helena with merciless fury, transforming the bustling mining town into a frozen tableau of survival. Snow blanketed the distant mountains, and the wind howled through the narrow streets, carrying whispers of both fortune and despair. It was in this unforgiving landscape that two souls from entirely different worlds would find their paths irrevocably intertwined. Evelyn Pierce clutched her thin woolen shawl tighter around her shoulders as she stood shivering at the train depot. The Eastern-educated nurse had arrived from Boston with high ideals and a commitment to bring modern medicine to the frontier. However, no one had prepared her for the brutal Montana winter or the disappointment awaiting her at the station. The doctor who had corresponded with her for months, promising a position at his clinic, was nowhere to be found. The station master had delivered the news with awkward sympathy. Dr. Williams had succumbed to pneumonia 2 weeks prior. There would be no job, no lodging, and night was falling rapidly. As the last of the passengers dispersed and the station emptied, Evelyn's predicament grew more dire. Her funds were limited, her knowledge of the town non-existent, and the temperature was dropping precipitously. The station master had locked up his office, leaving her alone on the platform with her 2 valises, one containing her personal effects, the other filled with precious medical supplies she had brought west at great expense. Across town, in the warmth of the Silver Dollar Saloon, Maxwell Reed was concluding a business transaction that would expand his already substantial cattle empire. At 32, Max had built a reputation as a shrewd but fair cattleman whose word was as solid as the mountains surrounding the territory. Unlike many who had struck it rich in Montana, he maintained a quiet dignity that commanded respect rather than demanded it. His ranch, the Silvercrest, employed dozens of men and was known for its progressive practices in both cattle raising and employee treatment. Another winter like this one, Randall, and you'll be glad to have sold. To me, Max said, sliding the signed documents across the table to his lawyer. The small spreads won't survive these temperatures without proper shelter and feed stores. Randall Simmons nodded, tucking the papers into his leather portfolio. That's why I advise the Johnsons to accept your offer. Better to sell with dignity than lose everything to the elements. Max took a final sip of his whiskey, laid a generous tip on the table, and rose to his feet. He cut an impressive figure in his tailored coat and hat, a man who had managed to bring Eastern refinement to Western ruggedness without sacrificing either. I'll head back to the ranch tonight, he informed Randall. Tell Margaret, I said. Hello. In this weather, the pass might be treacherous. Why not stay at the hotel? Max shook his head. I promised the men I'd be back. We're moving the herd to the southern pasture tomorrow. Besides, he added with a slight smile, I've ridden through worse. As he stepped outside, the cold struck him like a physical blow. He pulled his collar higher and made his way toward the livery where his horse, Tempest, awaited. It was then that he noticed a solitary figure huddled on the train platform, illuminated by a single lantern. Curiosity and concern pulled him toward the depot. As he approached, he realized it was a woman, seemingly abandoned with her luggage as night fell. "Ma'am," he called, his breath forming clouds in the frigid air. "The station's closed for the night. Do you need assistance?" Evelyn looked up, her face pale with cold, but her eyes bright with a determination that immediately caught Max's attention. There was intelligence in those eyes, and a certain stubborn pride. "I'm quite all right, thank you," she responded, with a Boston accent that sounded entirely out of place in the Montana wilderness. "I'm simply contemplating my options." Max glanced at her luggage, noting the medical insignia on one of the cases. "You're a long way from home to be contemplating options in a blizzard. Are you a doctor?" "A nurse," she corrected. "And I was to assist Dr. Williams at his practice, but it seems he has passed away. The telegram apparently never reached me in Boston." Max removed his hat respectfully. Dr. Williams was a good man. The town mourned him deeply. He paused, assessing her situation. "Do you have accommodations for the night, Miss Pierce, Evelyn Pierce?" "And no, I don't. I was counting on the doctor's arrangement." The wind gusted stronger, and Max made a quick decision. "Miss Pierce, Helena is no place for a lady alone at night, especially in this weather. The Grandview Hotel has proper rooms, and the owner's wife, Mrs. Hollister, is a respectable woman who can chaperone your stay until you decide your next steps. I'd be happy to escort you there." Evelyn hesitated. Years of proper Boston upbringing, warning her against accepting help from a stranger. Yet something in this man's demeanor, a certain steadiness and lack of pretense, convinced her that his offer was genuine. "That's very kind, Mr. Reed, Maxwell Reed of Silvercrest Ranch." Recognition flickered in her eyes. Even in Boston, certain Western success stories made the papers, and the Reed cattle empire was among them. "I'd be grateful for your assistance, Mr. Reed." Max lifted her bags with ease, surprised at the weight of the medical case. "You came prepared to practice, I see." "I brought what I thought a frontier town might need," she admitted. "I'm medicines, instruments, textbooks on frontier ailments. I sold my grandmother's silver to purchase some of it." This simple statement of dedication impressed Max more than any formal credentials could have. As they walked through the snow-covered streets toward the hotel, he found himself curious about this woman who had traveled across the country to bring healing to strangers. At the Grandview, Mrs. Hollister greeted them with surprise but immediate warmth. "Maxwell Reed, are you bringing in strays again?" she teased, but her eyes were kind as they assessed Evelyn's situation. "Mrs. Hollister, this is Miss Pierce, a nurse from Boston who found herself in unfortunate circumstances. She needs lodging and perhaps your guidance." The older woman nodded. "We have a lovely room available, Miss Pierce. Don't you worry about a thing tonight. A hot bath, warm meal, and good sleep will help you see things clearer in the morning." As Max prepared to take his leave, Evelyn extended her hand. "Thank you, Mr. Reed. Your kindness won't be forgotten." He took her hand briefly, struck by the strength in her delicate fingers. "Helena could use a good nurse, Miss Pierce. I hope you'll consider staying, despite this inauspicious beginning." Their eyes met for a moment longer than propriety dictated, and something unspoken passed between them, a recognition, perhaps, of kindred spirits despite their different backgrounds. "Good night, Mr. Reed. Safe journey back to Silvercrest." Max nodded, replaced his hat and stepped back into the storm, strangely reluctant to leave. As he rode through the darkened streets toward the mountain pass that would lead him home, thoughts of the determined nurse with the Boston accent and medical case full of hope lingered in his mind. The following weeks transformed Helena for Evelyn. After learning of Dr. Williams' death, the town council approached her with a proposition. They would provide the doctor's former office as both a clinic and living quarters if she would stay and serve as the town's medical practitioner. With no physician within 50 miles, her nursing skills were desperately needed. The transition wasn't easy. Some townsfolk were skeptical of a female healthcare provider, especially one with Eastern mannerisms and education. Others welcomed her expertise without reservation. The miners' wives, in particular, appreciated having a woman to consult about delicate matters. Evelyn threw herself into establishing her practice, working tirelessly to earn the community's trust. She treated everything from minor injuries to childbirth complications, often riding for hours on a borrowed horse to reach remote homesteads. Her dedication gradually won over even her harshest critics. Max Reed heard reports of the nurse's progress whenever he came to town for supplies or business. He found himself routing his errands to pass by her clinic, occasionally catching glimpses of her through the windows as she tended patients. Sometimes their eyes would meet briefly across the street, and a nod of acknowledgement would pass between them. He respected her space, understanding that she needed to establish herself independently. Their paths crossed properly again 3 months after their first meeting, when a violent brawl at a mining camp left several men severely injured. Evelyn had been summoned, but the wounds exceeded what she could manage alone. The foreman sent for Max, knowing his ranch hands included a former army medic. Max arrived to find Evelyn kneeling beside a miner with a serious chest wound, her hands steady despite the chaos around her. Her once immaculate skirts were stained with blood, and a look of intense concentration had replaced her usual composed expression. "Mr. Reed," she acknowledged without looking up. "I need clean bandages and someone to hold this man down while I extract the fragment." Without hesitation, Max rolled up his sleeves and followed her instructions. They worked side by side for hours, moving from one injured man to the next. Evelyn directed the operation with quiet authority, and Max found himself impressed by her composure under pressure. By dawn, all the injured were stabilized. Exhausted, Evelyn finally sat on an overturned crate, pushing stray hairs back from her forehead with the back of her wrist, the only part of her hands not stained with blood. Max offered her his canteen. "You have remarkable skill, Miss Pierce." She took a grateful sip before responding. "As do you, Mr. Reed. Your field medicine knowledge saved at least 2 lives today." "Army experience," he explained simply. "Wow, you learn quickly in war." Their conversation was interrupted by the mining foreman, who approached with profound gratitude and an envelope of payment for Evelyn's services. When the man left, she looked at the money with a mix of relief and sadness. "This will help me purchase more supplies," she said, "though I wish it hadn't come at such a cost to these men." Max studied her face, noting the circles beneath her eyes and the weariness in her posture. "When was the last time you ate a proper meal, Miss Pierce?" The question seemed to surprise her. I'm not certain. Yesterday morning, perhaps. Then I insist on escorting you back to town and seeing that you're fed before you collapse. Doctor's orders." He offered a rare smile. "Or nurse's orders, as it were." For once, Evelyn didn't protest. They rode double on Max's horse, her exhaustion evident in the way she leaned against his back for support. In town, he took her to the hotel restaurant, ordering a substantial breakfast for them both. As they ate, their conversation moved beyond medical matters. Max spoke of his journey west as a young man with nothing but determination, of building Silvercrest from a small homestead into a thriving enterprise. Evelyn shared stories of her training in Boston, her frustration with hospitals that treated nurses as little more than maids, and her desire to practice real medicine, where it was most needed. "My father wanted me to marry a banker," she confessed. "He called my nursing ambitions unladylike distractions until the day he died." "And yet here you are, saving lives on the frontier," Max observed. "I'd say your distractions have proven rather valuable." A genuine smile crossed her face, the first he'd seen from her. "What about you, Mr. Reed? No wife waiting at Silvercrest?" "No," he answered simply. "Ranching consumed my younger years. And then, well, finding a suitable partner in these parts isn't straightforward. Most women with the refinement I might appreciate wouldn't tolerate frontier life. And yet here I am," Evelyn echoed his words with a hint of challenge in her voice. Their eyes met across the table, and Max felt something shift between them, a recognition of possibilities. Neither had previously considered. As spring thawed the Montana landscape, a new warmth also grew between Max and Evelyn. His visits to town became more frequent, often coinciding with her clinic hours. Sometimes he brought supplies she needed, herbs from his ranch's garden, or fresh meat for her table. Sometimes he simply came to talk, sharing news from outlying areas or discussing books they had both read. For Evelyn, these visits became bright spots in her demanding schedule. Maxwell Reed was unlike any man she had known in Boston, straightforward yet thoughtful, powerful yet gentle in his strength. He treated her professional accomplishments with genuine respect rather than condescension, and never suggested that her work was temporary or secondary to marriage prospects, as so many Boston gentlemen had. The townspeople noticed their growing attachment with varying reactions. Some approved of the match between the respected rancher and the dedicated nurse. Others, particularly certain unmarried women who had set their sights on Helena's most eligible bachelor, were less enthusiastic. Gossip reached its peak when Max invited Evelyn to attend Helena's Founders' Day celebration as his companion. The annual event was the social highlight of the year, with a dinner dance at the newly constructed town hall drawing attendees from throughout the territory. Evelyn accepted with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. Her practical wardrobe contained nothing suitable for such an occasion, and she briefly considered declining rather than appearing underdressed. The solution came unexpectedly from Mrs. Hollister, who arrived at the clinic one afternoon with a large box. "This belonged to my daughter before she moved to San Francisco with her husband," the older woman explained, unveiling a gown of deep emerald silk. "She's taller than you, but I'm handy with alterations. It would do my heart good to see it worn again." On the night of the celebration, Max arrived at Evelyn's door in a formal suit that emphasized his broad shoulders and commanding presence. When she emerged in the emerald gown, her copper hair arranged in an elegant style she hadn't worn since leaving Boston, the expression on his face told her everything she needed to know. "You are breathtaking, Evelyn," he said simply, using her given name for the first time. The evening unfolded like a dream. They danced multiple sets together, causing knowing glances among the onlookers. During a waltz, as he held her, perhaps closer than strict propriety allowed, Max spoke softly near her ear. "I've never been one for dancing," he admitted, "but I find I'm developing a taste for it with the right partner." Evelyn felt her cheeks warm. "Mr. Reed, I do believe you're flirting with me." "Max," he corrected, "and yes, I am. Rather obviously, according to the expressions of Mrs. Henderson and her daughters across the room." Evelyn glanced toward the mentioned ladies, whose disapproving stares could have frozen Spring Creek in July. She couldn't help but laugh. "I believe I've inadvertently stolen Helena's most coveted marriage prospect." "You can't steal what's freely given," Max replied, his tone shifting from playful to serious. "But Evelyn, Whatever he intended to say was interrupted by a commotion at the entrance. A miner burst in, his clothes disheveled and face panicked. "There's been a cave-in at the Bluebird mine. Men trapped. We need help." The festive atmosphere shattered instantly. Men began organizing rescue parties, while women gathered blankets and bandages. Evelyn immediately switched from dancing partner to medical professional, mentally inventorying the supplies at her clinic. "I need to gather my equipment," she told Max, already moving toward the door. "I'll come with you," he responded without hesitation. "My men and I can help with the rescue." Within 20 minutes, they had changed clothes, collected necessary supplies, and were riding toward the mine site with a group of volunteers. The elegant couple from the ballroom had transformed into frontier professionals, united in purpose. The scene at the Bluebird mine was chaotic. Lanterns illuminated frantic workers attempting to clear the collapsed tunnel entrance, while members of the trapped miners watched in anguish. The mine owner, a corpulent man named Bartholomew Preston, paced nervously, more concerned with potential profit losses than his workers' lives. Max immediately took charge of organizing the rescue effort, his natural authority and experience with dangerous situations making him a natural leader. Evelyn established a treatment area, preparing for the injuries that would inevitably emerge once men were freed. As the night progressed, rescuers managed to create a small opening in the debris. Through it, they confirmed that at least 6 miners were alive but running out of air. The opening was too small for an adult to pass through. "We need someone small enough to squeeze through with supplies," the foreman announced. "Someone who can assess the injured while we widen the opening." Before anyone could volunteer, Evelyn stepped forward. "I can do it. I'm smaller than any of you, and I know how to treat their injuries." "Absolutely not," Max protested immediately. "The tunnel could collapse further at any moment." "There's no time to argue," she countered, already removing her outer jacket. "Those men need medical attention now, and I'm the only one qualified who might fit through that space." Their eyes locked in a silent battle of wills. Around them, miners and families watched the standoff between the powerful rancher and the determined nurse. Finally, Max's expression shifted from opposition to resigned respect. "You'll take a rope tied around your waist," he stated firmly. 3 tugs means we pull you out immediately, no matter what's happening in there." Evelyn nodded, accepting his terms. As miners prepared the rope and gathered the medical supplies she would take, Max pulled her aside. "Evelyn," he said quietly, his voice rough with emotion, "I had planned to ask you something important tonight before we were interrupted." She looked up at him, understanding the weight of the moment. "Ask me when I return, Max. Give me something to come back for." He clasped her hand briefly, then helped her prepare for the dangerous journey into the collapsed mine. The passage was even tighter than anticipated. Evelyn had to exhale completely to squeeze through certain sections, the rough rock scraping her skin as she inched forward with her medical bag. Inside the mine, she found the trapped men in varying states of distress. 2 were seriously injured, one with a broken leg, another with a head wound that had rendered him unconscious. The others suffered from minor injuries and the early effects of oxygen deprivation. Working by lantern light, Evelyn stabilized the wounded as best she could, while instructing the stronger miners on how to prepare the others for extraction. Once the opening was widened, she administered her limited morphine supply judicious, knowing it would be hours before all could be rescued. Above ground, Max directed the efforts to enlarge the tunnel without causing further collapse. Every few minutes he would call down to check on Evelyn's status, his voice betraying the strain of his concern. 3 hours into the rescue, a secondary collapse sent tremors through the mountain. Inside the mine, Evelyn threw herself over her unconscious patient as debris rained down around them. For several terrifying minutes, dust filled the chamber so thickly that breathing became nearly impossible. When the dust settled, she discovered that the passage she had used was now completely sealed. They were trapped more thoroughly than before, with air running out even faster due to the additional dust. Up top, Max's heart nearly stopped when the collapse occurred and communication with the chamber was temporarily lost. When Evelyn's voice finally came through, weaker but resolute, he felt a relief so profound it weakened his knees. "We're alive," she called up, "but the passage is blocked. You'll need to find another way in." The rescue effort redoubled. Using Preston's reluctantly provided mine maps, they identified another approach, a ventilation shaft that might connect to a tunnel near the trapped miners. It would take hours to clear, however, and oxygen in the chamber was already dangerously low. Inside the mine, Evelyn fought to keep her patients alive and conscious. She tore strips from her petticoat to create makeshift filters for breathing. Through the worst of the dust, she rationed the remaining water, using most of it to keep the unconscious miner's lips and mouth moistened. And she told stories, endless stories about Boston, about medical school, about her first months in Montana, anything to keep the men engaged and fighting for survival. As the air grew thinner, one of the miners, an older man named Thomas, just looked at her with rheumy eyes. "You're the one sweet on Reed, ain't you, the cattle baron?" Despite their dire circumstances, Evelyn felt a blush warm her cheeks. "And we're friends?" "Yes." Thomas wheezed a laugh. "Friends," she says. "Lady, half the territory is laying bets on when he'll propose. Never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you." "Is that so?" she asked, adjusting the splint on another miner's broken arm to hide her reaction. "Yes'm, changed him too. Used to be all business of that one. Last cattle auction, he was smiling, scared the daylights out of some of the newer ranchers." This unexpected insight into how others viewed her relationship with Max gave Evelyn something new to focus on as their situation grew more desperate. She found herself imagining a future she hadn't allowed herself to seriously consider. A life with Max, perhaps children, combining her medical practice with support for the communities around Silvercrest, above ground, as dawn broke over the mountain. The rescue team finally broke through to a tunnel adjacent to the trapped miners. Max was the first to enter, crawling through the narrow passage with a determination born of both duty and personal stakes. The scene he found tore at his heart. Evelyn sat with the miners in a tight circle, her face grey with dust and exhaustion, but still talking, still encouraging. One man's head rested in her lap, the unconscious one, Max assumed, while she stroked his forehead and continued her story about Boston Harbor in springtime. "Evelyn," Max called softly, his voice breaking on her name. She looked up, disbelief and joy washing across her face. "Max, is it really you?" "It's me. We're getting you all out of here." The extraction was painstaking. The most severely injured were taken first, carefully navigated through the newly cleared passage. Evelyn refused to leave until all the miners were safely removed, despite Max's protests that she was near collapse herself. When she finally emerged into the morning sunlight, a cheer went up from the assembled crowd. Families rushed to embrace their rescued loved ones. Preston, the mine owner, attempted to make a speech about the bravery of his operation, only to be silenced by a withering glare from Max. Evelyn swayed slightly as the tension that had kept her upright for hours began to ebb. Max was at her side instantly, supporting her with a gentle arm around her waist. "You need rest," he said, leading her toward a wagon he had prepared with blankets. "The injured," she began to protest, "are being tended by Dr. Simmons from Virginia City, who arrived an hour ago," Max assured her. "You've done more than enough, Evelyn, more than anyone could have asked." Too exhausted to argue, she allowed him to help her into the wagon. As he climbed up beside her and took the reins, she leaned against his shoulder, no longer concerned with proprieties or appearances. "You had something to ask me," she murmured, her eyes already closing with fatigue. Max looked down at her dust-covered face, the strength and compassion that had saved 6 lives, and felt his heart expand with certainty. "It can wait until you've rested," he said softly. "We have time now." She nodded, already drifting into exhausted sleep against him. Max drove carefully back toward Helena, cradling his precious cargo and planning the question he would ask when she awakened. A question about partnership, about joining their separate strengths into something even more powerful, about building a future together in this harsh but beautiful territory they both now called home. 3 days later, fully recovered from her ordeal, Evelyn sat on the porch of her clinic, watching the sunset paint the distant mountains in shades of gold and crimson. The events at the mine had transformed her standing in the community. No longer was she viewed as an outsider or merely tolerated for her skills. She had become one of them, a Montanan who had risked everything for her neighbors. The sound of approaching hoofbeats drew her attention. Max appeared on Tempest, the magnificent stallion gleaming in the evening light. As always, the sight of him caused a quickening in her pulse that had nothing to do with her medical training. He dismounted with fluid grace and secured his horse before joining her on the porch. In his hand was a small wooden box, carved with intricate designs. You're looking well," he said, his eyes taking in her recovered appearance with evident relief. "The whole town's talking about what you did." "The whole town should be talking about what we all did," she corrected. "It was a community effort." Max smiled at her modesty. "Nevertheless, you've made quite an impression. Preston has even established a fund for mining families and improved safety measures, though I suspect that has more to do with avoiding bad publicity than genuine reform." "It's a start," Evelyn acknowledged. "Change comes slowly, but it does come." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. Finally, Max turned to face her directly. "Evelyn," before the mine collapsed, "I had intended to ask you something important." He paused, suddenly seeming less assured than the confident rancher she had come to know. "The experience at the mine only confirmed what I already knew. Life here is unpredictable and often dangerous. It can end or change in an instant." "That's true anywhere," she observed quietly, "but perhaps more evident on the frontier." "Indeed." He took a deep breath. "What I'm trying to say is that I don't want to waste any more time. I've built Silvercrest into something I'm proud of, but it's incomplete. I'm incomplete." He opened the wooden box, revealing a ring with a single perfect diamond set in gold. "This was my mother's. She made me promise I would only give it to a woman of substance and character, someone who would be a true partner in every sense." Evelyn's breath caught as he continued. "I'm asking if you would do me the honor of becoming my wife. Not to leave your practice, I would never ask that of you, but to join our lives together, to create something even stronger than what we've built separately." Tears filled her eyes as she looked at this man who had come to represent everything she valued: strength without domination, success without cruelty, tradition without stagnation. "Yes," she said simply, "and with all my heart, yes." As he slipped the ring onto her finger, Max's usual reserve gave way to unbridled joy. He lifted her from her chair and spun her around the porch, both of them laughing like children. "Mrs. Hollister will be scandalized," Evelyn protested weakly, making no real effort to escape his embrace. "Mrs. Hollister has been selecting wedding linens since the founder's day dance," Max countered, finally setting her down but keeping his arms around her. "I believe half of Helena has been expecting this announcement. And the other half? They will come around when they see how happy we are." Their wedding, held that autumn in Helena's newly constructed church, united not just two people, but two worlds. Evelyn's former nursing colleagues traveled from Boston to stand beside her, while Max's ranch hands and business associates filled his side of the church. The miners she had saved served as honorary groomsmen, their wives and children filling the pews behind them. The couple established a unique arrangement that allowed both to pursue their callings. Evelyn maintained her practice in Helena 3 days a week, while also establishing a smaller clinic at Silvercrest for the ranch workers and neighboring homesteads. Max expanded his business interests to include investments in medical supplies and a small hospital in Helena, combining their expertise in ways that benefited the entire territory. Their home at Silvercrest became known as a place where Eastern refinement and Western practicality coexisted harmoniously. Books and medical journals shared space with cattle ledgers and maps. The dinner table welcomed everyone from territorial officials to ranch hands to patients unable to pay, with anything but gratitude. And if the former Boston nurse occasionally shocked visitors by riding astride in divided skirts to reach remote patients, or if the powerful cattle baron was sometimes seen helping his wife clean medical instruments after a difficult birth, the people of Montana Territory merely smiled. They had come to expect nothing less from the couple whose love story had begun on a frozen train platform and been forged in the crucible of frontier challenges. As the years passed and their family grew to include children who combined Evelyn's intelligence with Max's steadfastness, their partnership became legendary throughout the territory, not just for its romance, but for how it represented the best of what the American frontier could produce when strength and compassion, tradition and progress, east and west, came together in perfect harmony.